during the meeting, please call 818-937-8100. Please do not call in advance of the agenda items. May I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Brotman,
Here.
Devine,
Here.
Kasakian,
Here.
Najarian,
Here.
Mayor Agajanian.
Present.
And roll call for housing.
Authority Member Agajanian,
Present.
Brotman,
Here.
Kasakian,
Here.
Najarian,
Here.
Parazian,
Here.
Chair Devine.
Here.
Thank you. Next item, please.
The agenda for the Tuesday, July 28th, 2020 joint public meeting of the City Council and Housing Authority was posted on Wednesday, July 22nd, 2020 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. Next item, please.
One would be City Attorney regarding consideration of amendment to bylaws of Glendale Housing Authority pertaining to qualifications of tenant commissioners. A would be Housing Authority Resolution amending the bylaws of the Glendale Housing Authority to expand the eligibility criteria of one tenant commissioner.
Thank you. Okay,
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Madam Chair, members of the Housing Authority. This item is before you. As you know, the Housing Authority has 7 commissioners comprised of the 5 council members and 2 tenant commissioners. The 2 tenant commissioners are under our Housing Authority bylaws are required to be tenants of our Section 8 program. One of those 2 tenant commissioners is required to be a person of 62 years of age. In the recent past, the Housing Authority has had some challenges in filling the additional tenant commissioner, and so Housing Authority Chair Devine requested a report on whether or not we could expand the eligibility for the tenant commissioners. After doing some research and conferring with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, it was determined that while one tenant commissioner must be a Section 8 recipient, the other tenant, the Housing Authority and the City Council has discretion on who to appoint to that additional slot. So given that Ms. Parazian is eligible under the initial criteria, the Housing Authority would have the councils and the Housing Authority would have the ability to expand the pool upon which to select a tenant commissioner. What is noted in the report is that the council, and it's really the Housing Authority that would be amending the bylaws, and then the City Council is the body that makes the appointment as the governing body. The Housing Authority could expand the pool to include residents of the Housing Authority's rental housing developments that it provides financial assistance to. There are approximately 675 tax credit units that the Housing Authority has assisted, and another 306 HUD 202 units that the Housing Authority has assisted. And those units are, the 202 units are senior units. So the recommendation in working with the Community Development Department staff is that the pool of applicants be expanded to those tenants residing in the Housing Authority assisted projects, and that the tenants be qualified at 60% of area median income or below. Council certainly has the flexibility, the Housing Authority, certainly has the flexibility to expand that to 80%. And we would note, as we noted in the report, that the reason for the recommendation that for focusing initially on those tenants that are within the Housing Authority's developments is given the level of interaction that those tenants would have with the Housing Authority, probably more likely to have more knowledge of the Housing Authority's processes, as well as familiarity with the social service programming that goes on at those facilities. It was the assessment of the community development staff that the pool from that particular the candidates from that particular pool might have a little bit more expertise or working knowledge of our operations. Certainly within the Housing Authority's jurisdiction to expand that pool. So that's kind of where we're at. The recommendation is the Housing Authority's assisted projects with those tenants that are 60% of AMI, and happy to answer any questions.
Before I go to my colleagues, I want to ask, what will happen, for 2 years I have been Housing Authority Chair, and we were having a real hard time to find anybody. What will happen if we take anybody who's a tenant in Glendale with the same recommendation as you have, which is 60%, or what I would like to see up to 80% of whatever BMI, whatever you mentioned it. What will happen if it's just a tenant with low income? If we can't find somebody to
Yeah.
get anybody else who will qualify as a low-income person and residents of Glendale, a tenant from Glendale.
Again, that's within the jurisdiction of the Housing Authority to decide. We would probably recommend that the preference be given to those tenants that are in the Housing Authority projects, and that if no eligible candidate can be found, then the Housing Authority would be able to search broader to any low-income resident in Glendale, and without having to come back to the Housing Authority to make that change. So we have it written in such a way that the preference is for the residents of our projects, and then if you can't find somebody from that pool, then any low-income resident. So that's certainly within the council's policy discretion.
I just want to see anybody will second it, right?
I'm sorry?
Do we need second on this?
Well, it'll eventually, after the council has a discussion about it, it'll be, somebody will need to make a motion and second it, correct?
Okay.
May I ask a question or two?
Yes, please.
Mike, you said how many, again, you said 675 tax credit units and HUD 202 units were how many?
306.
306. So what we'd be saying is we would be drawing from those units, the 675 and the 306, which you're defining as housing authority assisted projects, right? And then anybody below, if we say 60% AMI. And I'm wondering, just first, is that correct? And then how many people do we estimate we have in our pool to select from, if that's what our criteria are?
I'm gonna have to defer to Mr. Lansfame or Mr. Zovak on that that particular question.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council and Chair and members of the Housing Authority, this is Peter Zovak. Can you hear me?
Yes.
To answer your question, you really have the ability to look at selecting from the tax credit projects detailed alone. That might be something the authority might want to consider, only because those tax credit projects are typically made up of families, whereas the HUD 202 projects are made up of elderly citizens. Right now on the Housing Authority, we do have the one tenant commissioner, Commissioner Parazian, who started off as a family household member and has since transitioned due to her tenure as qualified as the senior tenant commissioner. So if there is an interest in looking at filling that spot from a family, then we would suggest looking within the family tax credit unit projects.
Peter, I think the
Okay,
question
I
was
would-
how many individuals would be eligible if you limited it to that pool?
If you limited it to the family tax credit project, you'd have approximately 400 households that we could solicit interest to.
So some of those would be singles and some of those would have multiple adults living in them, correct?
Correct.
I'm still not getting it. There's 675 tax credit units. Why would we only be selecting from 400?
I only mentioned that because 400 of them are designated as seniors, or 400 of the 675 are designated as family projects. The remaining balance are seniors. So if the interest is to fill the Housing Authority slot vacancy with a family representative, essentially a non-senior, then your pool of 675 is about 400 to choose from.
Okay, but if we say the 675 plus the 306, so we're taking all the tax, because we can put the net a little bit wider and then we can create the preference, right? So
Correct.
if we have all the tax credit units and all the 202 units, that's what, 981. I'm just trying to get a rough sense. 981. Do we think we're talking about how many eligible people? Because some of them are going to be over 60% AMI. I mean, do we think we've got a pool of 1,000 people, or do we think we have, much less or much more? We're trying to get a sense of
Tax credits are
how
only
big our pool is
60%
going to be.
below, right? I mean, the tax credit units are all 60% or below, so they're all going to be eligible.
And I would just mention for the Housing Authority's consideration, the HUD 202 units are, for the most part, seniors. So you have that category covered. If you're looking for a non-senior family, then you would want to limit to the tax credit projects that had families, which is, as Mr. Zovac said, around 400. You certainly have 2 seniors on the council, but the idea from staff would be you'd want to represent the entire gamut of person that would be using the programs.
And if I can just add to that, Councilmember Brotman, I think for purposes of our discussion here, we're talking about the bylaws and who's eligible altogether. So I think your point is if include all of them, and then when you have an actual opening like we do now, you could focus the attention on the folks that are living in our family tax credit units. It might be a smaller pool, but at least those folks are going to be in the family units. And if the Housing Authority desired, for example, to have somebody from that pool, then you could limit it to that pool.
Right. I mean, we could just say, if we wanted to keep it simple, we could say any renter in the city up to 80% AMI, and then that could be the bylaws, and then we could have our own set of criteria for who we want to look for, who our priority candidates are, right?
If I may, Mayor?
Yes, please, Ms. Devine.
Is Mr. Brotman finished?
Yeah, I'm finished. I was just, yeah, I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Garcia, thank you very much for doing the background on this item. I really appreciate it because I think it's really important, especially now in the situation where we find ourselves with the COVID, to have representation, a voice on our authority that comes from our tenant population. I think I am not going to, since I am the chair of housing, and I believe Mr. Kasakian, you are the vice chair, I don't believe that I will speak for myself. I am not going to let age discrimination enter into my decision. The process has always been that we accept the applications, those that are interested. We review the applications, we interview the applicants, we make sure that they are willing to give up the time, they have the passion for it, the interest in it. So I feel that the wider the net is that we put out there, the more that we expand the pool of applicants, the better off we will be, and we will most likely have some very, very good respondents. So that's where I stand on this. And I will listen to my fellow colleagues to hear what they have to say. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other comments? Anybody to comment, or we're done? I didn't get
I
it.
have a question. Oh,
Okay, go ahead. Yes. What's the question?
I have a question. So for the just selection process, are we going to again send letters to that from that people from that pool to just be selected, or we're not going to send them the letters? How is that going to work?
I'm sorry, there was a brief interruption. Can you repeat the question?
Okay. So for the selection process, are we going to send letters to the people, from that pool, to just select somebody, or how is that going to work? Again, we're going to send the letters to them, to the people.
Well,
How is this going to work?
Depending on what pool of candidates the council would like us to draw from, we could, if it was, let's say, people in city projects, these 1,000 projects that we talked about, 1,000 units we talked about here, yes, we could send letters to all those people inviting them.
Okay.
If it was something broader, where, as the mayor had suggested, anybody that is of affordable income, we would have to do a larger promotion and attraction effort through social media, through television, through newspaper ads and whatnot. But if it is the pool from within our projects, we would send letters out to all those people.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor and
Yes,
Madam Chair.
Mr. Kasakian.
Yeah,
Yes.
my preference, thank you. My preference is for us to cast as wide a net as possible and to reach out based on income, not just on whether the person is a recipient of vouchers or a beneficiary of any of the specific housing programs that the city is involved in. I'd like to see that net cast wide and to do the necessary outreach, no matter whatever it takes. I mean, if it's social media and mail, I don't think the newspaper ads are effective anymore, but to reach out and try and find someone. And when we do find someone or potential applicants, to not inundate them with, to explain to them that the process, I know that Mr. Zovac had mentioned in previous meetings that when speaking to potential applicants, we are daunted by the workload when it is presented to them. And although the work that the Housing Authority does is important, I don't think we should necessarily scare them with paperwork at first. Let them know that the amount of meetings that they will attend where there's heavy load of items to consider is minimal, and to encourage them and assure them that staff is going to help educate them and bring them up to speed. And I'm sure you already do that. But I would again suggest that you approach potential applicants with the soft touch rather than with the pile of paperwork.
Okay. I just want to, Ms. Kasakian, are you agreeable to from 60% AMI to go to 80% AMI to make the pool larger?
Sure.
Okay. So are you agreeing to we take from anybody who is low income and is a tenant in Glendale rather than limit ourselves to what we have so far? Because as I said, for past 2 years, I tried to get somebody to join us. I remember almost 3 years ago, a person came forward and participated in one meeting and he left. And since then, we are still looking for one. So maybe if we expand the pool to any tenant with low income, if you want to suggest that and we vote on it and get this over.
Again, my suggestion is to cast whatever, to vote and introduce whatever is going to give us a largest pool of applicants.
So then, Mr. Attorney, City Attorney, Mr. Garcia, can we offer like what I said? Can you
Anybody can make-
formulate that and we vote on it? And-
Mr. Mayor, I don't think all the Housing Authority members spoke, but yeah, if somebody wants to make a motion and somebody wants to make a motion that the Housing Authority bylaws be revised so that second tenant can be any tenant in Glendale whose income is 80% of AMI. Somebody can make that motion and second it, and you can see where it goes.
I can't make that motion, right?
You cannot because you're chairing the meeting.
Okay. Anybody wants to?
Darian, does Mr. Darian have any comments?
Yeah, I have some comments. So, I mean, let's just think about this for a second. What are the issues that we deal with as a housing authority? Lately, it's been the acquisition, the planning, the review and approval of proposals that bring affordable housing to the city. I think that the person that we select, or the candidates for this seat, have some sort of skin in that game. The initial restrictions were for someone who was in a program. a housing subsidy program. And that made sense because that person understood the issues involved and the day-to-day life of someone in one of the housing programs that we administer. I'm not in favor of just opening this up to any tenant in the city. I don't think that any tenant in the city is a proper qualification. The same way as if any building owner or any property manager or any realtor, because if they have a perspective too on the creation of housing, and a property manager or let's say a contractor, a developer, has probably quite a bit of perspective on what it takes to bring housing to the city. So I'm against just opening it up to any tenant.
No, we didn't say any. I'm sorry to
Well-
cut you off. We didn't say to any.
Okay, well, we were kind of going there. I know, Mr. Mayor, you talked about an income limitation. So if someone is of low income, how does that, if they're of low income, if they're in a Section 8 waiting list or some sort of waiting list, I would go that way. But just because you're low income at 80% of the AMI and you're a tenant, I don't think that gives you the qualifications or the real wherewithal to be sitting on this board deciding what sort of housing projects, how many, do we want big units, do we want small units, do we want seniors, do we want 3 bedrooms? I'm not sure. So I want to, I know we've had a hard time and I'm all in favor of getting new applicants, but if we're going to open this up and cast a wide net, then let's go the whole Monty. If not, let's put some reasonable limits. And these people that we pick or that are candidates have to have some connection to the job that the housing authority performs. So that's just my thought on it.
But for past 3 years, we are having problem to find one person. So we have to open this pool to more people to find the right person. I just want to make sure that we are just talking about the tenant and AMI of 60 or 80. I would rather see 80 so to expand the pool. But how that person can do any harm if there are tenants and they are low income? It's just
Well,
they are
why
not
just a
in this.
Why just a tenant, Mr. Mayor? Why not someone who's a property manager? Why
No.
not someone who's a developer?
No,
Why not
that
someone,
that will
you
be
know.
different. Their benefit or their thinking about the housing will be very different if I'm a property owner or apartment building owner.
The same way the thinking as a tenant would be somewhat different. And I think, we should have diverse views on this board. We have a Section 8 candidate or seat, then we should have someone on the other end. I'm against just bringing a tenant in who isn't earning the AMI of 80%. I think that person doesn't bring anything to the table for me. In fact, may come in with an agenda which is far outside the purview of the housing authority.
But bringing a landlord or apartment owner, we have been criticized that we don't understand the problems that tenants have. They're complaining to us that all of you are landlords and you don't understand us. That's what they're complaining. So
Yeah, they sure
we
are.
have to bring a tenant in to our group.
I'm just saying, in a lot of our deliberations, if we had someone who was a true developer, who knew costs, who knew the makeup of the number of units versus the most efficient way to design buildings, wouldn't hurt. But I know the public. The public complains all the time. We probably have callers lined up now, ready to lay into the whatever, I don't know what they call. We're racist and we're this, whatever the tenants union has said lately about me and about my 4 white colleagues. I'll go with the flow. I'm just making a point.
Okay.
I have a question, Mayor. I have a
Yes,
question.
please, Ms. Devine.
Okay, when we did HCV previously for our applications, was that just Section 8 tenants?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so this number that you're giving us, this tax credit unions and HUD 202 units, does that includes the Section 8 tenants, or is that in excess of the Section 8 tenants?
That's in addition.
In addition,
And there might be a project or two that gets project-based Section 8 assistance, but that's the exception, not the norm.
okay, so that would give us an additional pool of 675 tax credit units plus seniors and families. And I think that's a wide enough net to cast for now. And let's see what we get. But to open it up, I think, to all low-income tenants, I'm not sure that that's the best way to go either. I'd kind of like to see them involved in the program. That gives them an insight, because we do have developments coming for affordable housing. It's gonna, we will need advice on affordable housing, et cetera. And I think with applicants being involved in our housing tax credit units and the HUD 202 units, I think that would be a good requirement. Those two would be good requirements. And those would be it, and would have a pool of thousands.
Now, what
so-
we were suggesting that initially we will go ahead with what we have. But if we don't want to wait another 3 years and then come back and say, okay, now we do it differently. They will go ahead with AMI of 60 or 80 and in the pool, those whom we have. But if we can't find, then we don't come back 2 years later and say, okay, now what? That's what we are trying to avoid.
Well, let's put it this way. Let's not wait 2 or 3 years. We're gonna do this application process immediately. Let's see what we get of these thousands. I agree. I think they have to have a stake in this, just like Laura Parazian. She knows of what she's talking about when she gives her advice and asks her questions, and that's the kind of person that I would like to see on the authority.
I'm ready to make a motion if no one else has any other comments.
Chair Devine and Mayor Agajanian, I do have a caller on the line.
Okay, let's go to the call.
Karen, you're live. Karen?
Hi. Well, this is Karen, in case you're expecting someone else to call into this meeting. Okay, I was wondering if you would consider moving the time of this meeting away from 3 o'clock, because that might actually open up your applicant pool more than just expanding your criteria, because I don't know too many tenants who are available on every Tuesday at 3 p.m. for these meetings.
Okay, thank you.
That whatever we decide this afternoon, you can always announce this evening at City Council so that it gets out to the community.
Do we
She
have
brings up a good point.
Okay, we have no other calls, and where we are, anybody wants to offer anything or any motion?
Well, I'll make a motion I think having heard everybody, my suggestion would be, for now, let's just say that we amend the bylaws to allow the selection of any resident of one of our Housing Authority assisted projects, plus any residents outside of the housing assisted projects who receive Section 8, up to an AMI of 60%. Let's put that forward, and then we can come back to this. I mean, we can go out, see who we get. We can come back to this in 3 months. We can come back to this in 4 months. There's no reason why we have to wait. So that would be my motion. I think that would probably satisfy most people here, and let's see what we get.
I'll second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Authority Member Agajanian,
Yes.
Brotman,
Yes.
Kasakian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Barazian,
Yes.
Chair Devine.
Yes.
For City Council?
Councilmember Brotman,
Yes.
Devine,
Yes.
Kasakian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Mayor Agajanian.
Yes. Thank you. What's next, Mr. Ajimi?
Next would be adjournment.
Okay, may I have a motion to adjourn?
For council?
For council,
Okay, with that, the meeting is adjourned at 3:41
need an-
PM.
We need adjournment from the Housing
Housing.
Authority.
Move to adjourn for housing?
Is there a second?
Second.
We are adjourned.